Welcome back to the channel, guys. Let's get straight into today's story. John Prescott built his entire political identity on a single image: the straight-talking bruiser from Hull, the bloke who understood the working class because he came from it. He wore that persona like armour. It made him untouchable inside Labour, a party increasingly dominated by university-educated technocrats who needed anyone who could still pretend to speak the language of the people they'd long stopped listening to. Prescott was their shield, their mascot, their proof that Labour hadn't abandoned its roots. But behind the pub-friendly bluster and the carefully cultivated rough-around-the-edges charm, Prescott backed and in many cases helped drive the very policies that hollowed out the communities he claimed to represent. He wasn't the defender of working-class Britain, he was one of the architects of political dispossession. Prescott's career is a case study in how a politician can wrap themselves in the flag of the working class while quietly handing power, influence and cultural control to the political elite. And nowhere is that clearer than his role in accelerating mass immigration, deepening Britain's entanglement with the European Union, and overseeing the transformation of Labour from a party of workers into a party of bureaucrats, activists and globalist managers. For decades, Labour voters believed Prescott was on their side, but the record tells a very different story. Prescott was at the heart of the New Labour project, a project that openly embraced the idea that Britain should be reshaped from above. Under Blair, Brown and Prescott, immigration policy was radically loosened. Critics at the time argued that the scale and speed of these changes were unprecedented, and many working class communities felt that consequences most sharply. Housing pressures increased, wages stagnated, public services strained, cultural cohesion frayed. These were not abstract concerns, they were lived realities in towns and cities that had already been battered by deindustrialisation. Yet Prescott, the supposed champion of those communities, backed the policies that intensified those pressures. He defended them, he sold them, he helped implement them, and when voters raised concerns, they were dismissed as backward, reactionary or misinformed. The message was clear: the political elite knew best and the working class should just stay quiet and adapt. Prescott also played a key role in pushing Britain deeper into the orbit of the European Union. While presenting himself as the voice of ordinary people, he supported a political project that transferred power away from British voters and into the hands of distant institutions. Many working class voters felt increasingly disconnected from decisions that affected their lives. They saw policies being made by people they didn't elect, in places they'd never been, according to priorities they didn't share. And Prescott, the man who claimed to speak for them, sided with the very forces that diluted their democratic influence. The contradiction at the heart of Prescott's career is stark. He claimed to be the embodiment of working class Britain, yet he constantly backed policies that weakened the economic security, cultural stability and the political voice of the same working class. He presented himself as the antidote to elitism, yet he helped construct a political environment in which ordinary voters felt increasingly ignored, patronised and sidelined. Prescott's defenders often point to his background as proof of his authenticity, but authenticity is not about where you come from, it's about who you stand with when it matters. And when it mattered, Prescott stood with the political elite. He stood with the architects of mass immigration, he stood with the champions of EU integration, he stood with the technocrats who believed they could redesign society without the consent of the people living in it. The consequences of these decisions were profound. Labour's traditional base, the industrial towns, the coastal communities, the working class heartlands, began to drift away, not because they suddenly became conservative, but because they felt politically abandoned. They saw a party that no longer reflected their values, their concerns or their priorities. They saw leaders who spoke down to them, not for them. They saw a political class that treated their communities as laboratories for social experimentation. Prescott was central to this transformation. He wasn't a bystander. He wasn't a reluctant participant. He was part of the engine room, and the working class paid the price. The irony is that Prescott's public persona, the blunt, no-nonsense, straight-talking northerner, became a kind of political camouflage. It allowed Labour to push policies that many of its own voters opposed, while reassuring them that someone like them was still in the room. Prescott's image was used to mask a deeper shift, the party's realignment away from the working class and towards a new coalition of professionals, activists and globalist administrators. By the time many voters realised what had happened, the damage was done. Communities that had relied on Labour for generations felt betrayed. They felt unheard. They felt politically homeless. and the man who had spent decades branding himself as the champion had helped create these conditions that drove him away. Prescott's legacy is not one of working class empowerment, it is one of working class displacement, politically, culturally and economically. He was not the defender of ordinary people, he was the bridge that allowed the political elite to cross into their communities and reshape them without their consent. And that is why his story matters, because it reveals how easily a politician can claim to represent the working class while advancing policies that undermine them. It shows how political branding can obscure political reality, and it demonstrates how the gap between rhetoric and action can leave entire communities feeling abandoned. John Prescott didn't sell out the working class overnight. It happened slowly, quietly, behind the scenes, while he stood at the podium and insisted he was still one of them. But the results are visible across Britain today. Fractured communities, weakened democratic trust, and a political landscape transformed beyond recognition. Prescott may have spoken like the working class, but when it mattered, he didn't stand with them, he stood with the elite. Thanks for watching, guys. If you want more honest political commentary and don't want to miss what's really happening behind the headlines, hit that subscribe button and drop your thoughts in the comments below.